X-Men. Get it!
Hey everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Battle of the Atom. This is your weekly X-Men podcast where we rank every story from A to Z.
I'm Adam.
And I am Zach and Adam.
Hey.
I gotta ask you a question.
Yeah.
You're involved in the United States education program, correct?
Yes, absolutely. On a daily, week daily basis.
A week daily basis. That's an odd unit of measurement, but I'll take it. What are your feelings on history class?
You know what? It presented in a fun and interactive way. It can be great. You know, I think we've come a long way from Miss Karpowitz in my 10th grade class and her overhead projector and her transparencies about World War II. I think we're really moving on to hands-on constructive learning. So today, I think we've got a little bit of a history class, don't we?
We do. This is like pull up a chair, get out your notebooks, because like the state and local government professor I had in my 11th grade, technically going to a community college history and government class. You're just going to have to verbatim write down everything we say word for word. And those are going to be your notes for the episode. I'm not even joking. It was a pain.
Oh, yeah. Those days of slideshows and extensive note taking in college.
There was no slideshows.
Oh, no slideshow. Just lecture.
No, he just talked in front of us in a rehearsed script. He had very good Bill Cosby-esque sweaters. So he had a lot going for him. Not my favorite teacher. Regardless, we are talking about history. And we're talking about history because Charlie Phillips went on over to patreon.com/XavierFiles. And he said, you know what? History is written by the victors. And do you know what wins wars? Money. So he gave us money to fight the battle of ill-informed X-fans. So, Charles, thank you so much. If you want to be like Charles, you can go right on over to that website. We'll talk about that later at the end of the episode. But like him, you could have an entire episode crafted around one story of your suggestion. And Charles found a loophole, Adam. Did you know that?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a loophole here. Because what he chose is basically all of X-Men.
Yeah, he chose all the stories, which is like wishing for no wishes. And we are not the genie. If we were the genie, you're older. I think I have a more Robin Williams energy, though.
Yeah. Wait. Are we each picking a genie?
Here's what I'd say. I was going to say that would default make you the Will Smith genie, but instead, I'll be the Robin Williams genie, and you be the Dan Costanella genie from Aladdin 2, The Return of Jafar.
Dude, that's not nice. I want to be the...
He's Homer Simpson!
Fair, but I would prefer to be the duck genie from DuckTales the movie.
I'll accept that. That's a good one.
Thank you.
Anyway, we're talking about X-Men Great Design.
Yes. Ed Piskor's magnum opus, his lifelong dream to summarize the entire history of the X-Men in 6 issues and how many pages?
40 pages an issue.
Yeah. This is quite an undertaking.
It's big. So, for those of you who don't know, Ed Piskor, he is a cartoonist.
Yes.
Like, a pure cartoonist. He writes, draws, colors, letters. He does everything in all of these books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very famous for the Fantagraphics series that he did called Hip Hop Family Tree. So if you're interested in, checking out what Ed Piskor is all about, check it out. He's a cool dude.
Yeah, this is an interesting story. So it legitimately is taking all of X-Men from, let's say, X-Men number 1 up through Extinction Agenda, more or less. And
yeah, I thought we were going to get to Mutant Genesis, and we don't really. We kind of... All right, we should pause and not talk about the end yet, because I think that's a separate conversation.
It is.
But you're right. It pretty much goes from Silver Age all the way through Extinction Agenda, which is a huge amount of story to try and cover in such a short period of time. And he has a very interesting way of doing that.
Yeah, so he breaks it up into 3 chapters, and by he, I mean, I'm pretty sure Marvel broke it up into 3 chapters. Because he could only...
reasons?
Yeah, he could only put out so many, and they didn't want to put out number 3, 8 months after number 2.
Mm-hmm.
But the first chapter, the first 2 books are the Silver Age.
Yes.
Honestly, the first one is everything that happens before X-Men number 1, which some of it's told from flashbacks, some of it is just bringing continuity and making it explicit. It's very interesting. This is, I would argue, my favorite issue of the entire run.
The pre X-Men 1 issue.
Yes.
Yeah, I can get behind that. If you are interested in X lore and you kind of want to get a solid idea of what the basis of the series is before you start reading about what even happens in the series, you could do worse.
What's interesting about it is it takes a lot of desperate threads and weaves them together in a coherent way that hadn't really been done before.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's interesting. And he does this thing where he keeps the Silver Age going, but gives it a heft. He gives it an actual driving force so that all those weird stories about the X-Men fighting odd aliens and stuff have meaning and have consequence to the Dark Phoenix saga. They're all looking for the Phoenix.
Well, and I think that that's pretty important to note right off the bat, is that this is not just a strict retelling. It is also an interpretation.
It's a remix.
So that, yeah, that's a perfect way of putting it. It's a remix, and we're getting Pisker's overlapping ideas of how these stories could converge all the way through issue 6. And it's a pretty cool way of exploring this, because not only are you getting... actual X-Men history, but you are also getting a new interpretation of it, which is pretty fresh.
It is. I like what Pisker does in streamlining the X-Men as a story. I love his art. We focused on his story a lot, but he has gritty's not even the right word for it. It's a little bit of a dirty, cartoony feel, kind of like, comics with an X. In the 70s and 80s.
Sure.
Go
ahead.
And it's also told very similar to like a bio comic or something like that. Like Fantagraphics could have put this out and no one would have batted an eye.
Yeah, it's definitely tapping into like a zine aesthetic, an indie comic aesthetic. There are some of the drawings almost have sort of a Dan Clowes kind of feel to them. He's evoking almost a Silver Age line quality. And these books are designed to look somewhat aged. None of the pages, one of the coolest things that he does in terms of color design is that the pages are not white. The pages are sort of this off, khaki parchment color, so that when he does use an actual bold white, because even the white of the speech bubbles are not completely white. They're still utilizing the background of the page. So when he does use a white, it's like, wow, this is like very, very bright and brilliant on the page.
He also uses a unique style zipatone on every page. He doesn't just copy like 3 individual ones across the entire book, which is a wild touch on his part.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the level of craft that went into this is pretty immaculate. And the page layouts are vastly different. I mean, he's generally sticking to 4 horizontal rows and 3 vertical rows to divvy up his pages. But even within that kind of grid structure that he's using, he breaks things down into such small pieces sometimes that you could have a page with, 16 panels on it, or more, depending on how much action and how much history he needs to pack into a single page.
Yeah, his craft is great. One thing that I really love about these is if you have the books physically in just the floppies, they've got a heavier stock cover, so it already feels better. The pages are a different stock. They feel different. They smell different. It seems like a unique thing. There's no ads until the very end of the book. Like, he made it so that it's not broken up by stuff.
And even then, there's maybe 2 ads, maybe 3. The inside covers have ads, and then there's usually an ad before. What he does at the end of each issue, which I also think is really cool, is he sets up a bibliography. So there's an additional reading section at the end of each issue that gives you where to go next. If you want to learn what the story was behind this particular page in the book, he's pointing you in the right direction.
Yeah, it's very interesting. This is an experiment.
Mm-hmm.
It's a mostly successful experiment.
Where do you find that it doesn't necessarily line up, doesn't live up to its expectations? Because I know where it doesn't necessarily work for me. And I can't tell if it's because of my expectations of what I thought the book was going to do, or it's just the way it was made.
For me, there's a chunk in the middle.
Okay.
I think it's issues 4 and 5 are kind of the weakest for me. Because what they are is you get to the Dark Phoenix saga, and then you have to get through Inferno in 2 issues.
Yeah.
So even more than the Silver Age issue, the second Silver Age issue, Pisgor is kind of going from plot point to plot point to plot point, just jumping.
Mm-hmm.
And there doesn't seem to be the same narrative heft, the same push that you got with, okay, well, all these weird things are happening in the Silver Age, but it's all towards the Phoenix, and it's all towards Dark Phoenix Saga. It was all moving to something, where this is moving to something that I like the way it resolves itself in issue 6, but it doesn't move there with the same amount of gravitas, and it doesn't land as well as it did earlier.
Well, I do think that I think that a lot of us reading the first couple of issues and seeing the remix quality that he was bringing to this assumed that there would be some kind of twist, especially in the final issue, to kind of the entire framing device that he's using here is that the Watcher is looking down on the 616 and retelling this story, which is it's a cool idea. But I kind of expected him to have a different, maybe a little bit more out there take for the end. That's not necessarily what we get. We do get a resolution that ties together sort of an alternate version of what could have happened with Days of Future Past. And then if we're going to spoil the end of Grand Design right now. So if you haven't read Extinction issue 2, which came out earlier this year, stop, read it, come back. But, it's supposed to be a continuity loop. So I'm supposed to finish reading the 6th issue of this and go back and pick up issue 143, which I'm assuming has some sort of personal significance for Ed.
No, that's just the issue after Days of Future Past.
Okay. Hey, so why not?
The way it loops back is it's, oops, guys, they accidentally caused the Days of Future Past in this one.
Right.
So they fix that. Because that story actually doesn't get told when it sequentially should get told.
Mm-hmm.
It throws off everything. And this ties in, the Extinction Agenda stuff to, okay, wait, now anti-mutant bigotry is on the rise. Yeah. And makes a Days of Future Past happen, which is an interesting idea. I don't think it's the best executed idea in the book.
Yeah, I think I want to be clear that I'm looking at this almost from I feel like we're nitpicking a little bit because the goal of this is definitely achieved. The idea of taking this unique both visual and storytelling approach to doing this series is 100% achieved. It is an amazing artistic thing that to look at these 6 issues And if you're a fan of X-Men, like, you gotta check this out. Like, it's just so cool and filled with so many little nuggets from all different points of continuity that it's amazing. But I do think if we just, take away the artistic achievement of it as a story, just looking at it from that perspective, I think it does leave a little bit to be desired.
Well, I was talking to somebody about this earlier this week while I was rereading it. This is so much information that it's like an index.
Yes.
This is this thing. Go to here. Now this is the actual story. Mm-hmm. It's like fast forwarding through the X-Men's history, which for someone like me who knows what the X-Men history is, it's great. But then also there's a part where he introduces Nathan Christopher Charles Dayspring as Scotty Sun Summers as a baby.
Yeah.
And then says, hey, this baby's going to be important. And then the baby gets kidnapped in Inferno and then doesn't really show up anymore. And then Cable shows up later, and I know that that's Cable, and you know that that's Cable. But if I handed that to my wife, who knows that Cable is Scott Summers' son, I think she knows that. She doesn't know it's Madeline Pryor's son. Man, I should talk to my wife about Madeline Pryor. Anyway, but like, you wouldn't know that. You wouldn't make that connection. You wouldn't have any idea. There's weird dropped things that only an X-Men fan would pick up on, but they seem to be like kind of important things.
Well, I think you're making a good point, and that is that especially the Silver Age stuff seems to be kind of exhaustive in it's very complete, I don't feel like we're losing much there, but as we get up towards the 90s, where we get towards the end of this, like past Inferno, it has so much still to tell, and it's such an overwhelming thing to kind of fit all of this into these 6 issues that I agree. Like, at a certain point, he does have to kind of like take a step back from telling every little nitty gritty detail. But by doing that, it sort of doesn't live up to what he starts off doing.
Yeah, like, he tells the story of Ileana going to Limbo on Octopusheim, or Island M as we're now calling it, I guess. And her coming back as an adult, or, a teenager. And then it never comes up again. It doesn't even come up during Limbo, or Inferno.
Yeah, but that's also because he's making a specific decision to not branch out. He's very intelligently not touching things like New Mutants for very long. He does introduce them, but he's not going to go through their entire...
but that introduction is all around an issue of X-Men.
Right, exactly. So the X-Men remain the focus. And I honestly just feel terrible critiquing this in any negative light, because I just feel like this is more than just about almost anything we've talked about on the show. This is such a passion project for an individual.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Ed has talked about this many times in interviews and online about how this is something he's dreamed about doing since he was a kid. And the fact that not only has he accomplished this amazing task, I mean, I'm looking at the floppies right now, and, it's it's a good, I think, 2 inches tall of comics that, probably took him a great deal of time to get out in such a good schedule, I think, really. I mean, it was not like over several years that these got put out. It felt like I think it was 18 months at the
Something
most.
Something like that.
Right?
Yeah.
Over 2 summers. So no pun implied there, but it's an amazing achievement. So if it doesn't necessarily live up to its original premise, like, I almost just don't care. Because part of me is just like amazed that Marvel published this, and very happy that he got to do the experiment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been critiquing it a bit because that's what we do.
That's what we do. Yep.
But this is still an amazing achievement, and even when it doesn't land as well as it should, it's interesting.
Yes.
It's unlike anything else that's out there from the big 2. And I'm excited to see with stuff like this, with like Zdarsky and Bagley's Spider-Man life story, and with Tom Scioli's Fantastic Four grand design that's coming out soon.
Yeah.
They're embracing hey, let's just let someone do something weird. Let's just let someone channel their vision through this and see what happens. And I'm excited for more of that stuff.
Me too. I love Tom Scioli's work, and big fan of his Transformers versus G.I. Joe. Still have yet to read his GoBots.
Wait,
but
have you read his Transformers versus G.I. Joe the movie?
I have. Yeah, it's absolutely bananas.
Guys, if you don't know about this comic, Tom Scioli did a Transformers versus G.I. Joe comic, which was like 6 issues?
Right. Well, no, I think it's actually like 13 issues long.
I don't know. I haven't read it.
Yeah, it's very good.
I think I own it. I just haven't read it. I need to.
It's pretty wild. I mean, it is absolutely like it's colored with crayons, guys. It's so cool.
Yeah. His Transformers versus G.I. Joe, the movie, is the comic book adaptation of the movie adaptation of that comic book. Right. The movie part doesn't exist, though.
Yeah, that is a very, very like meta thing that is just, when I picked that up, I was like, what am I looking at here? And then when you realize what the conceit is, it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. So looking forward to seeing more Grand Design-esque things from, some more unique artists. And I don't know. This is going to be a tricky one to rank, I think.
Because we do rank things here. We have a long list. Our list is 264. Is it 264?
264.
Yeah. 264 stories long, starting with the Dark Phoenix saga and ending with the Draco. There's a bunch of stuff in between. You can look online. It's in the show notes every week. Green design. I would say, let me throw this out here.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's definitely better than number 38, X-Men Legacy 300, which is the Forget Me Not
yeah,
story.
Forget Me Not.
I think it goes above that for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I think just standing on its own feet as this, this artistic achievement, it's definitely really cool. I don't know that it's going to crack the top 25 for me, just in terms of, classic X-Men stories.
Because number 26 is Life Death, and Life Death is very similarly like this weird, unique story, especially for its time, that's heavily driven by, in this case, Barry Windsor Smith's art.
Yeah.
And I think Life Death is a little better.
I think if I was going to put it somewhere, I would probably put it at, I'm going to suggest that it would go in between Rosenberg's New Mutants Dead Souls and right below that, which would put it above the first round of Allred and Milligan's X-Statics.
I think that's fair. That would make it the new number 30. An incredibly good showing on this list for Mr. Piscor.
Yeah. And congratulations, Ed. Before we talk about the next story, I just want to plug, he does this absolutely, I think I've mentioned this on the show before, but he does this absolutely awesome YouTube series called Cartoonist Kayfabe. And if you haven't checked it out, go on YouTube and check it out. But they go through old issues of Wizard magazine page by page and bring out the comic books. They actually have the floppies of just about everything they talk about in each issue. Such a cool comics history thing. So check that out.
Awesome. Now, next on our list is another history story. In fact, this is the issue of comics that most inspired Ed to do Grand Design, he said.
Yeah. This is Uncanny X-Men 138. You also at home might, as I do, have this reprinted as Classic X-Men issue number 44, which was an incredibly important issue to me as a kid.
I'd like you to expand on that because I have some thoughts on that, but I want to hear yours because you actually had it as a kid.
Yeah, I obviously did not have Uncanny X-Men 138, but I think I don't know if I've talked about this on the show, but like I had grandparents who, wanted to order everything out of a catalog for me. And luckily for me, I think both Sears and JCPenney both had comic book starter packs that you could get in the like later half of the mid to late 80s. And so for Christmas, I would just get these like giant packs of like 50 to 100 random issues of comics. And it would be like a random issue of Amazing Spider-Man or West Coast Avengers. And I didn't know what the heck was happening in any of these. So I remember very specifically getting like some random issues of Uncanny X-Men, and I had no idea what was going on in the book. But I also got Classic X-Men 44, which it explains what X-Men is about from the Silver Age to the end of the Dark Phoenix saga. And I was like, oh my God, this is like my personal Bible. This is so cool.
I think that's fascinating to me. Because when I was reading the Claremont stuff for the first time as a youth, I had it in the Essentials.
Yes.
Which were the paperback. So I knew everything. It
Yep.
it wasn't hard for me because it was like, oh, it's right there.
Yep.
And nowadays, you have Marvel Unlimited, so you can just have everything.
Exactly.
But you couldn't before. You
No.
didn't know what was going on. So having this issue coming after the most important X-Men event of all time, say, hey, by the way, this is what you missed. This is everything else.
Well, this is the kind of issue that you don't see anymore. Because we do assume that people are going to go back and, see these trade reprints or have a subscription to Marvel Unlimited and they're going to go back and they're going to follow the run or at least have read enough to keep up with what's going on currently. There were no trade paperbacks at that point. You know what I mean? There was no Epic Collection. There were no Marvel Essentials. So you just had the random issues that you had in your collection. And so an issue like this is really vital if you wanted to know, like, it is a literal history lesson. It's fantastic.
This is Chris Claremont and John Byrne, by the way.
Yes.
But it's done well. Byrne does a really good job drawing all this stuff in X-Men history while still making it feel cohesive as John Byrne style.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I like it a lot. It's a good series. Like, realistically, you don't really need to read this issue. Like, today.
No.
Nowadays, you don't need to read this issue. But at the time, it was great. I know I've talked about it on the show before, but I spent a lot of time when I was younger reading the DK Ultimate Guide to X-Men, written by Peter Sanderson.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up, because that was kind of your guide growing up to what was going on in continuity. That's
what this is.
Yeah.
It's hey guys, we know this is confusing. This could help.
Mm-hmm.
And it's done well. It does give a little bit more breathing room to all of X-Men history than Grand Design's able to.
Yeah, you can see, though, the very, very direct line between Ed Piskor reading this probably as a kid and thinking like, hey, how cool would it be to do this for all of X-Men, especially the 90s era. So, there's even just the way that the pages are laid out, you can kind of see what his inspiration was.
Absolutely.
He's taking it directly from this. The other really cool thing about having the classic X-Men issue is this has one of my absolute favorite backup stories, which is the story of Rogue kissing Cody, which is written by Ann Nesenti. And having only read anything about Rogue as an adult, reading a story about her as a kid and having this like vital moment and then coming home and realizing the Mystique is her mom, that blew me away as a kid. I was just like, what in God's name am I reading? This is so cool. And I think this issue is largely responsible for hooking me on the franchise.
That's awesome. That is like really neat to hear.
Yeah.
So let's be honest though. This was essential for a time. I would not call it an essential issue today, which makes it hard to rank because it's like ranking a It's like ranking a clip show episode of an old sitcom.
I was going to say that. Yeah. You know, the idea that they didn't have a script for that week's episode or the actors were out of town. So they did a clip show. And it is John Byrne reinterpreting those events. So if that's interesting to you, great. I would definitely recommend getting the classic X-Men reprint for the backup story. I mean, that's an outstanding little piece of art there. But you're right. As a standalone, Uncanny 138 is non-essential, especially if you've been reading it as you did, Zach, with the essentials.
Right. So here's what I'll throw out.
Okay.
I think this is better than the X-Men versus the Avengers 1-4 from the 80s.
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
At 189 right now.
Yeah.
Is it better than the issues of Uncanny X-Men where Cannonball fights Gladiator and then they do some space stuff at 176?
I don't know. I think you're in the right realm there, though. You know, you're in the right part of the list.
You know, I think actually I want to go a little lower.
Okay.
How about this? Is it better or worse than the first issue of X-Men? Ever?
I think it's better.
I don't think it's as good as that issue of Wolverine where they go to the bar and he talks to Nightcrawler, and it has that good Assad Ribbit cover.
Good. That's a good spot for it, right there. I like that.
That's 184.
Okay, I like that. That's a good place for it.
Yeah. Also, in this story, John Byrne does draw Kitty wearing a bedazzled shirt that has a cuss on it.
Yes. Yep. So,
which, if anyone except for John Byrne did, it's a derogatory term for a woman. You can figure it out. But if anyone except for John Byrne did that, it would be hilarious. With John Byrne, it's less so.
I guess we've got to kind of... I don't know if we can discern between the John Byrne that of that time. Is there a difference? I don't know.
Someone has done a statistical analysis.
Yes.
On essentially 80s Marvel comics in their treatment of female characters.
Yes. He does poorly.
John Byrne's Alpha Flight does not do well. John Byrne's Fantastic Four does not do well. John Byrne's She-Hulk does not do well.
All right. Well, anyway, we spend
never meet your heroes, kids.
He's a great artist, not a great person, right? I think we've said.
Speaking of someone else who's a great artist, and someone who, at least when I've talked to him, seems like a great person, the last story we have is actually, and this is kind of a unique thing for us, but I really like it for what we're doing here. Mm-hmm. This is just one issue in a larger story, but from an X-Men focus, this is the only issue that matters, and it does tell a complete story from start to finish, so I think we can count it.
Yeah, this is Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross's Marvels #2, which is, I believe, titled Book 2 Monsters.
Guys, if you haven't read Marvels, Marvels is really good.
Oh, it's so cool, isn't it?
It's just so good. I love Kurt Busiek's stuff. Like, have you read Astro City yet, Adam?
I have not, but you have recommended it many times, and it will definitely get read at some point.
You know how Brett Anderson did God Loves Man Kills, and that was very good?
Mm-hmm.
This is what he's been doing besides that.
Okay.
It's so good. It's just the idea of Marvels, which is the man on the street seeing all of these heroes and all these comic book things happen and reporting on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's that, a person in a superhero world idea expanded, but instead of what would have been if Marvels came out in 2003, being like, man, superheroes are the worst. This is a dark, gritty world. It's like got a Silver Age hopefulness to it where it's not corny. It just feels optimistic. Mm-hmm. And there's something beautiful about that.
Yeah. It is a really fantastic project that I think gives a good credence to, what it would actually be like if this was happening. But it does have sort of the perspective of the narrator is one of awe. And I think that makes it such an enjoyable read because he is just confounded about what's going on around him. and he just wants to engage with that world in the best way that he can. And this, to me, is the best of the 4 issues. And there are other maybe more larger cinematic moments in Alex Ross's art that might be better than what happens in this issue. But this issue centers around the introduction of the X-Men, and really the heart of this issue is about the hatred and the racism against the mutants. And it ends up focusing around this very small little girl who's been abandoned by her parents, and somehow I think this is his daughters bring her home.
His daughters take them in. Yeah, Phil
Yes.
Sheldon, who's the photographer and the protagonist of this. He's been following superheroes. He sees their rebirth as a story
Yes.
that he wants to capture.
Mm-hmm.
So while he's caught up with looking up into the sky and seeing the Fantastic Four and seeing Giant Man and seeing all these things, seeing gods like Thor, he is also seeing all this talk about mutants, people who aren't like us, the other.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, Phil gets caught up in a mob, in a racist, like, lynching mob.
Yeah.
And he says something came over him, and it was just the hate and the energy, and everyone saying that these people are bad. These are the enemy. These are the people you should hate. And it gets to a point where, you don't ever learn the X-Men's names.
Mm-mm.
You see them, and you see them as monsters and other in the villain. And you see a moment where they're attacking the X-Men, and Bobby wants to start a fight with the humans, and Scott puts his hand on his shoulder and says, "Bobby, he's not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't worth it. This is not what we do." And it's incredibly powerful. And in that moment, you realize all this is about the irrational hate that is in our world against people of color, against people of different sexualities, against someone who's just from a different country than you, someone who worships a different god than you. These are people, just like the X-Men. And when the mutant metaphor is done well, these are people, just like you and me, humans with emotions and soap opera and drama in their lives. And we hate them because they're different.
Yeah,
this does this well.
Yeah, there's a great moment when Sheldon discovers that the mutant girl is living in his basement, and he starts by thinking that there has been a stray dog in the basement, that the girls have been sneaking food. And he comes face to face with this girl who is not someone who could pass. She has a face with almost no nose, these very, very large alien-like eyes, almost no hair with these little pigtails. And we get to this point as part of that conversation where we go from him assuming there's a stray dog in the basement to him telling his wife she's just a little girl. And that is paired with all of this imagery of the riots and the language that's being tossed around. I think another thing that really is done well with this is that one of the things that I think is difficult about accepting in the Silver Age that the X-Men are and mutant kind in general is quote unquote hated is because they don't really look all that different from the rest of the heroes that are pictured in this series. But the way that Alex Ross illustrates them, and their first appearance on the scene, which is told and shown in very, very stark black and red, that these guys are something a little bit different, and they are something that people are afraid of. It's done extraordinarily well.
Yeah, the X-Men are always painted like a horror comic. Mm-hmm. They're still on model, but it's everything to do with the framing and the lighting. And Ross is a master of the craft for a reason. I think there was a hot second where, because Alex Ross was getting paid to do big group shots of Silver and Golden Age superheroes, please, because they sell.
Yeah,
I think people got a little burnt out on Alex Ross and forgot that, oh wait, he's incredible.
He's a very good storyteller, and this issue also contains some other elements of just to have a stark relief. This is also paired with Reed and Sue's wedding, which is also part of this particular issue. So we're seeing Sentinels here.
The Sentinels are done so well. It's like this stark Art Deco vibe. Like the first thing that comes to mind, and this is a bad movie, but Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow.
Yeah, terrible.
Do you remember that 2004?
Yeah. That's like a green screen disaster, but cool visuals, right?
Yeah, it has that. This is a scary pulp noir look to it, and it works real well. It sells the Sentinels as horrifying.
Yeah, I think this does wonders. If you've never read it before, you should be able to actually pick up a copy of this in your local comic store if they have a lot of back issues, because they just did, for an anniversary edition, a reprint of each of the 4 issues with really, really beautiful back matter, extra illustrations, interviews, scripts, and even some bonus art. So they're really, really nice. There's also, we're not reviewing this right now, but as part of that series, they also released a very short epilogue, which is essentially the X-Men Christmas story.
Yeah, 98, 99?
Yeah. So, we get the X-Men in front of the Christmas tree before the Sentinels attack. And it's a pretty cool, very short thing.
It's great. Don't pay $5.99 for it new. Wait for it on Marvel Unlimited. It's really good. It's like 15 pages though.
Yeah. It's brief. It is very much an epilogue, but you should be able to check this stuff out if you want to see Alex Ross doing some really good, beautiful X-Men work. So where do you think this falls on the list, Zach?
Where is our highest, not really an X-Men story?
Oh boy.
Like the ones where we stretched. It's 78, Howard the Duck, 8 through 11. And this is better than that Howard the Duck story.
Oh, absolutely. Because I would say that despite the fact that Marvel's as a miniseries is not an X-Men miniseries, this particular issue really gets it. It nails the characterization, and it does something that the Silver Age couldn't necessarily do. And
it does something that today's comics can't necessarily do.
That's true. Yeah, it doesn't always nail it. So, yes, I think it's definitely better than Howard the Duck 8 to 11, which I do love. But,
it's better than number 51, What If Wolverine Was Lord of the Vampires? I'll say that.
How do you think it stacks up against something like Dennis Hopeless Hallam's X-Men Season 1?
I think that Season 1's pretty comparable, but Season 1 doesn't hit as high of highs as this.
Mm-hmm.
I like Season 1, but this is like an essential summation of what the X-Men can and should be.
All
so
right.
I think it's better than
here.
that. I think it's better than E is for Extinction 1 through 4 from Secret Wars.
Mm-hmm. How high are you thinking here then?
It's not as good as Grand Design, and it's probably not as good as that Zorn issue of New X-Men.
That was something that I think it maybe doesn't top, is number 36, which is on New X-Men 127, the Zorn one shot. But I would put it up above X Club at 37.
And you know how much I love X Club.
Yeah.
Guys, it's a good story. It's our new number 37, Marvel's number 2.
Excellent showing.
So there you have it. Thanks to Charles Phillips, you know everything about all of the history of the X-Men, right? And you can do this show for us now. We can retire finally.
Oh, thank goodness.
It's been so long. I've been so exhausted. I've just wanted to be done for
so many stories.
So many stories, so little time.
He's just kidding, folks. We've got still about 500 episodes in us.
We will do this until one of us dies.
You keep saying that. I don't want to be...
Do I?
Yeah, you've mentioned our deaths 2 episodes in a row. It's scary.
Have I really? Man,
Yeah.
Look, guys, I'm going to be real honest. I don't remember anything that happens after we record one of these things until I edit it, and then I edit at speed and a half.
There you go.
So I only half know what's going on there.
We sound like chipmunks.
Yeah, it's great. I have a better sped up voice than you, but you have a better regular voice than me. So it's very frustrating.
Zach, I just want to be clear. You have a very lovely voice. I feel like people don't give you enough credit for your voice. And I feel like people give me too much credit for mine.
Why, thank you, Adam. That's very sweet of you to say.
It's true. I believe that.
Charles went on over to patreon.com/XavierFiles, and he tossed money our way to get an episode around him. I can tell you right now, there are like 14 spots left in 2021.
What? That's wild.
Yeah. They're throughout the year in 2021, just with how some of the Patreon rankings go. But like, look, this is very popular.
Zach,
when it
Zach,
comes
it's
to
not
these.
even 2020.
I know, it's very scary to me. Very scary to me.
We're
making
plotting
these
out years of our lives here.
Why do you think I've said until we die? Because people won't let us stop. Legally.
Until the heat death of the sun.
It's nice if you can support the show. It's really fun. If you can't, that's cool too. No, honestly, no sweat. What else do I normally say here?
Well, you got to tell them how to do that. Where do they go? They
go to patreon.com/XavierFiles.
Boom.
Go there. You'll figure it out, guys. You're smart. Anyway, I'm also online at XavierFiles on Twitter, where I say dumb stuff about good comics. And I am also, this is kind of exciting, Hawksbox Talks, which I edit and help contribute to, but 99.9% of the credit should go towards Chris Edelman and Robert Secundus. Hawksbox Talks are a series about the Jonathan Hickman run on X-Men, is no longer on XavierFiles.com, where you could find the latest and greatest X-Men news content and stuff like that. Hawksbox Talks is now hosted on Polygon.com.
Wow. Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah, so we're essentially the new McElroy brothers. It took them a year to replace them, but they found us.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's really cool.
Chris and Rob are, again, I keep saying it, they're doing amazing work.
They're blowing me away every week. It's ridiculous. I am very lucky to be attached to their gravy train.
Yeah.
Also, maybe leave a review on iTunes about this show, or don't. You could get a sticker probably, though.
Yeah, as we mentioned last week, if you want a Battle of the Atom sticker, leave a rating and a review. It could be good, could be bad, doesn't matter. And we've got some stickers for you.
In the one day since that episode that first announced this went up, and us recording this now, we have gotten one review. So
Okay. So still lots of stickers to hand out.
Lots of stickers, but maybe not by the time you hear this. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? We'll see what a week does. Adam, where else can they find your slow jams? Guys, you can really get groovy with my slow jams on Twitter at Arthur Stacy. Got new pages of Bish and Jubes, the Cross-Time Conundrum, every X-Men Monday at adamrec.tumblr.com. I recently did an episode of WMQ Comics podcast, which I believe is called the WMQ&A podcast, with Dan Grote. And it's cool. It's basically just an interview mainly about Bish and Jubes, which is approaching its end. And I think it'll be out this week that this is coming out. So we'll make sure to post that online.
Absolutely.
And that's good. That's about it. What are we doing next week?
Next week, we're going to talk about Cable and X-Force. It's
Yes.
going to be fun. You remember how we talked about the Purple Era? We're going to talk about the Purple Era some more. It's good stuff.
Cool, man. Sounds good.
But it is. I'm excited. Maybe we'll have a special guest. Who knows? Ooh, secrets. But until then, this has been Battle of the Atom. We hope you survived the experience.
Get it!